Today, we're going to do a will it run on this fine piece of equipment. No, I'm just messing with you. That thing's never running again. We got this Toyota pickup, which we've worked on before. There's some other videos on the channel on this if you're interested. But we got kind of a strange problem, which I'm going to detail, but we're having some problems running and driving, so let's dig into that and see if we can fix it. So when it's cold, it runs great. It doesn't necessarily throw codes. If you push it hard enough, sometimes it'll throw some codes randomly. Sometimes it'll throw one or the other. Sometimes it throws a MAF sensor code. Sometimes it throws a lean code. And the third one is sometimes it throws an idle air control valve code. It will do none of those consistently. And no matter what I do, goosing the throttle or whatever, driving it under different conditions, all those sorts of things, different gears, nothing makes it throw codes consistently. It seems, and it takes a while. No matter what, it won't throw a code right away. It takes a long time. So I started out doing some basic evaluation, some sensors. Obviously the throttle position sensor, I checked that out, which I checked it out before on another video, and it checked out good then. Well, it checks out good now, and it checks out good in the live data. The IAC, idle air control, that all checks out and everything, as near as I can tell. It might have some issues, but it seems to be working. All the timing and the cam and crank sensors and everything work. And I did check out the mass airflow sensor, and it seems to be working. And all the little auxiliary sensors, like the little intake air temperature sensor and all that stuff, they all appear to be working. So I dug down a little deeper and I went into some of the deep engine control circuits like the O2 sensors and things like that, and they appeared to be working too. But then I took it for a long drive. It was doing okay on short drives, and especially when cold. And one thing to remember when cold is it's running on pre-mapped fuel tables. It's not necessarily running on sensor inputs. And then it would warm up and it would have trouble, and sometimes it would have trouble starting. If you kick the throttle up, kind of adjust your idle up, it would start easier, but it wouldn't run any better. So usually that's like an idle air control problem or something, but I've looked at that extensively, and that doesn't appear to be what it is, unless it's something I'm completely missing. Anyway, so then I took it for a long test drive, and I got some data. What happened was the O2 sensor just started to slowly drop out. The voltage started to drop. So looking at that footage, we see that the voltage slowly drops out until finally it just goes to nothing. The upstream O2 sensor just goes to zero, and then it's just dumping in so much fuel that eventually, if you kept driving it, it would just start to bog down. Even with your foot mashed to the floor, it would go slower and slower and slower because it was just not dumping too much fuel through, and it was backfiring and all that. And just to verify here, I'm going to try to show you a little bit what it's doing. So as you can see, it's still not up to operating temperature. It started fine. I had a little bit of belt squeal. I got to tension that up. We're going to take it up to operating temperature, and then I'll show you kind of a little bit what it's doing. So as you can see, right now it's throwing the System 2 Lean code, but it's not giving me the qualities that you would think if it's running too lean. It's actually giving me the qualities you'd think it would be running too rich. So I think the system has some misinterpretation problems there. Let's start it up. Take a look at the live data. So right now everything appears normal. Calculated load, ECT, obviously we're not going anywhere. Vehicle speed, spark advance looks good. Intake air temperature 88, that's about right. The MAF sensor looks about right. So right now you can see, let's make sure whether we're in open loop or closed loop. So we are in open loop right now. So hopefully it'll get up to operating temperature and you can see. But even right now, the sensor should be registering. It's 0.015 volts, and it's getting a 0 reading off of the sensor. But once that goes into closed loop, right now it's just relying on fuel tables and fuel maps pre-programmed. But once it goes into closed loop, let's watch that and see when it goes into closed. Right now it's running pretty good in open loop. See, I didn't even clear the code and it went away on its own, so sometimes it's doing that too. It's realizing that it's made an error. I hope you can see the screen on this scanner. I'm doing my best, you know, out in the sun. And so we're getting 0.2 volts out of this and still 0 on the calculated reading, which would be your fuel percentage. That's the symptoms we're getting. I'm trying to reproduce them, but it's only when it starts to get hotter and hotter and hotter and fuel starts to build up in the exhaust that it's really exhibiting all these problems. I think to a certain degree it is running a little rich. But which isn't great for the catalytic converter. But yeah, we were having some misfire issues, and I did replace the cap and rotor because they were worn, and that fixed some of the misfire and some of the starting issues. But for the most part, this is still going on, especially when you drive it for a while. Basically what that did is made it a little easier to drive on a warm start. So let's replace the O2 sensor, and we're going to look at the wiring while we're down there and make sure it's not a wiring issue, because obviously that drop in voltage and lack of reading could be wiring. So let's take a look. So now we've got this nice and hot with our initial testing. You know, we're going to do what every good mechanic wants to do and mess with the exhaust system. That seems perfectly fine. So the O2 sensor we want is the upstream one. You can barely see it. That's the exhaust pipe coming down, and it's kind of down, hidden under there. I'll show you from underneath. We go under the vehicle, and it's the one before the cat right here. Now the one after the cat, right there, that one measures your cat efficiency. That doesn't have as much to do with engine tuning. This one tells the engine the fuel oxygen ratio, you know. So we're gonna try to take that off, you know. Yep, she's blazing hot. Perfect. So the O2 sensors for these trucks, if you're not familiar with them, they have this adapter that bolts on. So it is kind of like a standard O2 sensor that's screwed in here, but it's screwed into this adapter with a gasket, which most vehicles, they just screw right into the exhaust. There's usually a bung welded on. But this has a bolt-on bung, so there's two nuts that you got to take off without breaking, and yeah, that's always fun. So let's see if we can get those nuts busted loose, and then we're just going to replace this whole assembly. If not, in a pinch, you can always unscrew the O2 sensor from the bolted-on bung bracket assembly thingy, majigger, doohickey, that's a technical name. Okay, I think you can see there. This is the O2 sensor. We're going to take off. Oh, one of the bolts is broken off. This has been replaced already, I believe. Well, okay. That's, sorry, what I meant to say was one of the studs is broken off. And that's always a joy. I wonder if I should just try to unscrew the sensor rather than try to disturb the seal. I hope it's not because of a leak here. If the stud is broken off, I'm going to try to take something and poke it down that hole. If the stud's broken off, it could be causing an exhaust leak, which, even though it's after the sensor, could mess with our reading. So if that stud is just kind of broken off flush, I think I'm going to leave it for now. I'm also going to unplug the sensor. There we go. This dust falls out of the plug. I'm sure that had nothing to do with it. Actually, the plug inside looks pretty clean. The wires look pretty good. I don't see any broken. I'll get a little closer here. Yeah, the wires seem good. And it is in this wiring loom all the way up. So I know you can't see it, but it is in a nice wiring loom almost right out of the connector there. So I don't think wiring was our issue here either, because gear's intact and all the pins and everything look good. So let's spin this, try to spin this out of here and take a gander. She came loose right away. That in my book is a bad sign. Let's see what it looks like. It's probably all coked up, but the sensor's looking pretty new, which, oh my goodness, it is coked up. Okay, well, that's not surprising, but it still looks pretty new. This new sensor is a little different. It could either be good or bad, I don't know, but anyway, it is what it is. We're going to carefully stick it in there. I do love working on exhaust systems when they're burning hot. No, I do not. Where to put my wrench? Well, where did I? Oh, for Pete's sake. Oh, I'm getting too old to crawl out from under this vehicle 15 gazillion times. I need a lift. Doing this on the farm today. 50 grunts. Yep, all right. I will plug this back in here. Let's see, make sure to get it in the right way. Yep. Heard the snap, that's good. This ought to be fixed because you really want a nice tight seal there. Like I said, you don't want any air leaks because that'll pull in extra oxygen past your sensor, and it'll think it's seeing too much oxygen. So let's test this sensor. It's a brand new sensor. If this doesn't do the trick, then we know it's something else like air leakage or wiring or something. So we got our new sensor in. So right now it's reading lean. It's definitely not hunting with the O2 sensor, and the O2 sensor is reading. So I don't like that lean condition though. I'm worried we may have an oxygen leak. Well, I let it here idle while I closed the hood, and we dropped back down to 0 again. So, okay, let's take a look at that. Is it dumping so much fuel in and it cooked the new sensor already? That was pretty quick. I don't think that could happen that quick. Okay, so here's our hot starting issue. Sometimes it doesn't want to restart like that. I'm wondering if that because it's dumping too much fuel in. So we're getting voltage from the sensor, and it is in closed loop, so it should be relying on this sensor for input. Okay, back to the drawing board on that. Back into the belly of the beast, and now it's nice and blazing hot. Perfect. So what I did, I crawled under with the truck running, and I felt around that O2 sensor, and sure enough, I can feel air pulsing through that hole where the broken stud is. So day 2 on the Toyota. You know, it's a beautiful rainy day. Where are we at? Well, as you can see, the exhaust system has been pulled. We pulled off with much difficulty the manifold and the kind of pipe before the catalytic converter, and we welded this plate on because the studs were just completely foobarred, both of them. So we welded this plate on, and of course the O2 sensor just screws in there now. These bolts are kind of redundant anyway. Also, there was this seam up here that someone had zipped off and welded up poorly, and there were some air holes in there, so we did a little bit of grinding and filling there. Manifold looks pretty good. For now, we're just going to reuse the old gaskets. There was a bolt missing on the exhaust manifold. That's not good, so the only bolts holding this rear on were this one, and just this whole section was slopping around. Did manage to salvage the studs on the EGR port there kind of a little bit. I don't know. We're going to put this back together and hopefully it'll run a lot better. All right, we're all buttoned up again. Got some new bolts and things, you know, because tearing exhausts apart is great fun, and you know, you never break any bolts. Nope. Okay, let's fire it up and see what happens. Starts right up, that's good. Of course, she's on open loop, gotta let it warm up. Running on the pre-programmed fuel tables. 54 degrees. 1400 RPM. She's idling a bit high, but I had adjusted it just so that people could yard drive it, which is probably a bad idea because then you know, people drove it. At some point we're gonna lower that idle back down to spec, but she is still cold, so 1500. That's actually not bad for a cold idle, but I believe on the warm idle it's still a little high. Let's wait till we get to closed loop here, and then we can check our, well, I guess we can check now. No voltage. Maybe it's not warm yet. I think this is a heated sensor. I'm not sure. There we go. There's some voltage. Let's graph this one so we can look at it. So it's compensating back and forth roughly, which is about what it should be doing. Why is it still running at 19.5? What's the voltage output? 0.085. 0.75. 19.5. I mean, the sensor is registering, which is better than before when it got warm. Let's graph it and see if it's bouncing or if it's solid. Now it's solid, but it is at idle. Well, let's take her for a drive. I'm just sitting here at idle, the long-term fuel trim, which, I mean, you want that to be 0. I mean, it's sitting up here at almost 40. It's just dumping lots of fuel in. I don't know. So I took the intake off, and it's full of like oil. I mean, I don't know, it's down inside the resonator or whatever this is. I'm not sure. So where are we at now? Like day 79? I don't know. So I've been kind of turning this around in my noggin, trying to get a handle on this. And as much as I try, I just can't find anything that's, you know, specifically wrong up here. And I don't want to pull the parts shotgun out and just start blasting away at this thing, you know. I could replace the fuel regulator, but I don't really think that's the problem. I've eliminated all the sensors, the fuel pump, the fuel pressure, just every possible thing. I've checked for air leaks, vacuum leaks, I don't know. I even checked for exhaust leaks, and, you know, still getting conflicting information. I'm getting rich when it should be lean. So I've been thinking about this. I've been thinking really hard. And I'm thinking that the catalytic converter might have issues. If the cat's plugged up, it's going to cause some exhaust issues and probably give some incorrect feedback, which could cause all this. The other thing is, when I was looking at the long-term fuel trim, which was just cranked up to the moon, that takes a while to get that way, and it just, you know, slowly adjusts and stacks and stacks and stacks over a long period of time, because it's supposed to compensate for an issue, for like something going bad or something. That's what it's there for. And nothing's going bad, except we haven't eliminated the catalytic converter. On this truck, the second O2 sensor doesn't gauge cat efficiency or anything. The only thing it does is it says, well, there's something in the pipe between point A and point B. Is it a cat? Is it a plugged cat? We don't know. There's no way to determine that without pulling it apart, because the computer and the sensors don't have the technology to tell you here. So I'm thinking we look at the cat and we see what's going on. So here's the cat. This is the inside. I mean, it's not, I can see light through it. I'm gonna try and show you here. I don't know if you can see it or not. I mean, there's some particles and metal bits and shavings and all the things down there that you'd normally expect from an exhaust system, but it's not what I'd call clogged up. I mean, you can see light through it. So people are saying online, I've checked the readings off the MAF sensor and the mass airflow sensor, and it seems accurate, but people are saying sometimes with this problem, if you unplug it, it'll start and run. Wow, look at that. But it's running. It's running off of the fuel tables. And let me turn off the flashlight here. Sorry, it's the middle of the night. It's running off the fuel tables, and that's just a set value of 0.1. I can rev it. And it runs now. Okay, let me plug that back in just to verify. Plug that in. So now, if my calculations are correct, which they never are, it should stall out again and not run. Well, I think we found our problem. So me from the future here, I filmed a whole bunch of stuff after this, and my SD card got corrupted and I lost it. Let me summarize it for you. I was looking back through this data over and over that I recorded on the various test drives and just running it idle. And I kept missing this one thing, and that is that the MAF sensor kept spiking every once in a while. It would just go really, really high. I mean, it would go up to like, 2-3 pounds per minute, even just 1.5 pounds per minute. The spec is in grams per second that generally people use, and when I did the conversions and everything, it was like 3 times the amount of air registering on the MAF in spikes. Sometimes for a little bit, sometimes it would register normal, and I didn't see it initially in all the data I was looking at, because when I would scroll up and down to the data, I'd look through and go, oh, the MAF sensor is normal. So the mass airflow sensor was kind of sending corrupt data every once in a while, just intermittently, not all the time. So what we got was the computer was seeing that, and it was just adjusting the fuel trims up and up every time it saw a spike, and the long term was just going up and up and up and up. So eventually over time you had that long term fuel trim just spiked and set, so it was dumping all that extra fuel in. The short term fuel trim was also seeing those spikes and adjusting accordingly and going rich. Well, then when I cleared out all that fuel trim data, and I cleared the computer data and everything, reset it, the engine wouldn't run. And I suspect that's because the data that it was slowly adjusting for that bad MAF sensor over time, it set it back to factory resets, and it couldn't adjust quick enough to that huge variation in data from the MAF, and it just wouldn't run. That's my theory. We determined it to be a bad MAF sensor with a certain degree of certainty. I could never be 100% on one of these things, because when I looked through the data, it was intermittent. But at any rate, I figured it needed replaced, and although it was a slight bit of a gamble that it would completely fix the problem, I decided to take that gamble. I don't like pulling the parts shotgun out and just blasting away at vehicles, and I thought this was sure enough of a bet that the MAF sensor was bad that I took that chance, and I asked the customer to order a new one. So we put in that MAF sensor and it ran great, and we went for a test drive. I believe I have the test drive footage, which I can show you, and the normal sensor values and everything. But the end result was that the MAF sensor was intermittent, and I didn't catch it when I was going through the data in my initial diagnosis and everything. So just be real careful and look at all the data for a long period of time when you're looking through these things, which I should know this, I've been doing it long enough, but I didn't. I made some assumptions in my head about things that could be wrong, like the O2 sensor and everything, which the O2 sensor was bad, it was coked up. So the final summary was the MAF sensor was slowly going bad and dumping more and more fuel in by the computer, so it eventually did coke up the O2 sensor, and that just made it worse, because then the O2 sensor values just dropped out and it was nothing because the O2 was bad. I replaced the O2 sensor, and we kind of went back to where we were a little bit. It was running, but then it would eventually load up with fuel again. So because of the MAF sensor going bad, it caused the O2 sensor to go bad. Fortunately, on this job, I didn't end up replacing any parts that weren't actually bad, so we got lucky there. When you're troubleshooting these things, look at all the data and make sure you find the root cause of the problem, and don't make assumptions. You know, I make those mistakes a lot, but hopefully you can learn from my mistakes. So let's take a look at the end result and show you how it actually runs. So here overseas and in countries that aren't the United States, Dr. Pepper does not taste very good. I don't know if that's because they don't carbonate it properly or what the deal is, but well, let me tell you, over here it's delicious. So for all you people in countries like Australia that, you know, think Dr. Pepper isn't very good, let me tell you, I'm here to say it's delicious. This is not sponsored by Dr. Pepper. I just happen to like Dr. Pepper. I don't have any sponsors, but you know, if I did, I like Dr. Pepper. So let's take this for a drive and do a little on-the-road diagnosis. Back road here, running it through different RPM ranges, and it's a nice Kubota.
That's pretty. That's like it's nice.
Looks brand new. I'd like to have a Kubota, but I hear that when somebody's selling you a tractor, they want money for it. Well, that's a little bit of a problem because I don't have any. Well, she's running good so far. I might jinx myself, but the fuel trims are still responding the same, and at this point before I don't think they were. Also, the MAF is responding nicely as well. It's not just locked up in the high ranges like it was before. Yep, even at low throttle I'm getting a nice fuel trim response. Like I said, it is running on the rich side according to the fuel trims. However, it is an old truck. It's got 246,000 miles on it, so it's probably compensating for old injectors and an old fuel system and everything else. So you got to take that into account when you're looking at your numbers. Look at these roads. I can't imagine my trucks fall apart out here. Like I'm gonna blow right past the intersection where I need to turn, but maybe I did already. No, not. That's all right. We got plenty of fuel.
That's a long way.
Well, yeah, that's why I'm thinking of the past the intersection.
Maybe we'll find some cows.
Maybe. That's a thing around here. Apparently, you lose your cows sometimes. And the neighbor will drive past and say, "Hey, did you see any cows?" And you'll see him driving around the neighborhood for a couple hours, and well, he's looking for his cows, because nobody can build fences to hold in cows for some reason. It's a thing. I don't know, this doesn't look familiar. Don't get lost and broke down in the middle of an area with no service. I don't have my phone, so I got my wallet. That's completely useless out here, especially when there's nothing in it. I don't think this is right. I don't remember this. I don't know.
Yeah, the delivery
for the both of us.
Oh, Jesus.
Go off into the ditch and we're going to be stuck here forever. It really won't be deliverance. Yep. See now, that country wave, what that wave is for, let me explain that to you. What that means is, whew, we both survived that encounter and we both made it through without going into the ditch. And it's a wave of relief, basically. You got to kind of translate the waves out here. There's the one finger wave, and then there's the two finger wave, and you know, then there's like the whole hand wave. The whole hand wave is kind of like, you know, well, that requires more effort. So data still looks good. Oh, there, it's pulling a little bit of fuel. That's good. That's what I like to see. It is adjusting. I think we may have resolved the problem. We may get stuck out here for the rest of the day, but at least we're getting a full road test here. That's a good thing. Ooh, for sale. Wonder how much they want for that. Probably too much. I mean, if they want more than 25 cents for it, I can't afford it, so it's kind of a moot point. Nope, I don't even have 25 cents. We're running normal fuel ranges. It's not running into the rich side anymore. It's up and down. I think when you have your foot in the throttle, it wants to run more rich, which makes sense. And the new MAF sensor adjusts properly when I back my foot off the throttle. I don't remember any of this. I think we're in trouble.
You really don't know where we're going?
No, honestly, I have no idea.
Well, cars have gone across here, so someone's back here.
Well,
or other people.
I mean, there's roads in the Sahara Desert that cars have gone across, but that doesn't mean anybody's there, you know.
That's true.
Oh, there's an old beer crate, so somebody's been back here. Wait, we have a road sign. I don't even remember the name of the road that we're supposed to be on, though, so this might be completely useless. Air conditioning. Come on now. Oh, there's another stop sign up here. Oh, okay. I'm gonna run off the road trying to get this window up. There we go.
Yeah, you gotta lift it.
It's a farm truck. Okay. We got telephone lines. It's a sign of civilization. I'm gonna turn left here because that's the direction I kind of want to go. I mean, you know, if you turn left long enough, you're gonna. Of course, nothing's labeled. There's just this doesn't even have a. There's no. This could be a driveway for all I know. It's not.
Oh, Jesus, look at these.
Don't get stuck now. Don't.
Why did I come again? I never would have found you back here.
No, nobody would have, except for maybe somebody playing a banjo, is what I'm saying. Oh, Marty, I got good news and I got bad news. The good news, we fixed your truck. The bad news is your truck is stuck out in the boondocks and we don't know where it is. God's Country Gun Club. I don't think we're going to stop there. We got to hit a road eventually. And by a road, I mean something that's maybe paved. Hey, I see a house. Oh, civilization. Is it a real house or is it like a shack? Yeah, I think whatever road number this is. Yeah, this is the main drag. Values are still looking good. In case you were wondering, I'm sure you're not at this point. Well, the customer will be happy if we can actually manage to return his truck to him. I mean, otherwise I was just going to roll it off a cliff anyway, so we do not have fourth gear. We have 1, 2, and if you shift manually, it'll give you 3. Probably going to diagnose the transmission separately. That's kind of its own issue, and that strikes me. I was thinking back to the last video we did on this truck. The last video, I think it was, and we serviced the transmission, and I put in what the customer gave me for transmission fluid. Well, this is an A304 F or H transmission, I think, and actually it takes Dexron fluid, and I don't think, I have to go back and check, but I don't think we put Dexron fluid in. Not that it's that tremendously critical, but to some transmissions it is. So honestly, I'm not sure what transmission fluid we put in, but I don't think that's unless it gummed up a solenoid or something, I don't think that's causing the problem. Works fine if you shift it manually, just gotta remember to do that. Well, she's running like a dream now.
It really is.
We even have air conditioning. We got the full 9 yards. Before when you tried to turn on the air conditioning, it would just stall it right out. Nice little truck when it runs, except for the weak brakes and broken window, and that's why we have all these little signs all over the place, you know. So when you get in the truck, you have these hazard warnings. Probably would be easier just to put a list of what actually works on the vehicle, you know. Right now, just at this normal throttle cruising along at 40 mile an hour, we're getting a normal wavering around 0 on the fuel trim, up or down, plus or minus, which is just about perfect. It looks like when it's on the colder side, it wants to dump a little bit more fuel in, but it seems a little normal. I'm gonna call this one fixed. That was a nice long drive, way longer than I intended it. Oh, somebody left the door open. That's fantastic. I'm sure nothing got stolen. Well, my car's still here, so. So thanks for sticking with us this long. We do appreciate it. Hopefully this little video might have helped you or helped somebody, I don't know, or provided some random entertainment or source of fix for insomnia or something. But anyway, we appreciate any likes, subscribes you can give us. Helps me out, helps the channel, you know, helps my morale making these videos, you know. And maybe we'll have more on this truck down the road. I don't know, it is a farm truck. We might do the transmission, but if you want to see more, feel free to subscribe, hit that bell button so you get notified if anything on this truck comes out again. And as always, thanks for watching.